So what's your exact
If
title?
that works for you.
Yeah, sure, that's
My
fine.
my exact title is, yeah, I'm a national park ranger here in Yosemite National Park, specifically in Yosemite Valley. And I work for the Division of Interpretation and Education, but my current position is that I'm Yosemite's Community Engagement Specialist. So basically, I'm working with external parties, meaning different demographic groups like Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, African Americans, and making certain that they feel that connection to Yosemite and by extension to all the national parks.
So how long were you a park ranger before you took over that particular?
Well, see, that's the thing. I'm still a park ranger. I'm
Right, but
just,
did you
I'm
like
a,
start out as like a park ranger like junior and then have to work your way up, or was this
no,
position already there?
I see what you're saying. I started out as a seasonal park ranger. Most folks
Okay.
start out as working in a seasonal position because most of the parks for Death Valley are insanely, for Death Valley, it's insanely quiet during the summertime because it's just too hot there for most people.
Oh,
So
right.
most folks start out working in a seasonal capacity. Then if they want to continue working for the Park Service as a career, they start applying to various pathways for permanent positions as a permanent park ranger. So I've been a permanent park ranger since about 1991, but I started out in a seasonal capacity in Yellowstone in 1987. But
Okay.
currently I've been in Yosemite as a permanent ranger for over 23 years.
Wow, that's a long
Yeah,
time.
it's a long time. Yes.
So how did you get there? I mean, did you always want to be a park ranger when you were a kid? What
No,
were your
not
dreams?
when I was a kid. I didn't want to be a park ranger. Didn't really know that much about what park rangers even do. I basically started out as a, just like everyone else. I started as a kid, but I was a military kid. So because my dad served in the Army and also in the Air Force, for a few of his assignments, we were with him. We weren't with him in Berlin after World War II. We weren't with him in Korea when he was in the infantry, and we weren't with him in Vietnam when he was in the Air Force. But we were with him when he was stationed in England, and I lived in London, England, and we were with him when he was stationed in Germany. So part of my childhood was in Germany and England, and that specific experience in Germany is where that seed was planted that eventually sprouted, if you will, that became the career of the national parks. There was a family trip to Berchtesgaden, and Berchtesgaden is in Bavaria. It's now a national park, but at that time it was just this region in the Bavarian Alps near the border with Austria. And so we were taken, my brother and I, along with my mom and dad, were taken to this beautiful, incredible mountain retreat. And
Mhm.
I never forgot that experience of being in the mountains and looking over a railing and seeing clouds 1,000 feet beneath me
Wow.
and looking across and seeing the peaks of all these beautiful mountains with snow kind of unfurling with the wind. As the wind blew past the mountain peak, it would take the snow with it, and the light coming through the snow and all of that. And so it's like I was at the mountaintop, as Martin Luther King used to put it. I've been to the mountaintop, and it was a beautiful view. And I left the view, but the view never left me.
That's
That's the best
amazing.
way of putting it. So when you have a view like that, and then you end up, I mean, we moved to London, England, we moved to Kansas City with the military and my father, but we ended up back in Detroit. So when you have a view of the Bavarian Alps, and then you spend the rest of your childhood in Detroit, in the inner city, the thought is, what happened? What happened to those mountains? And so I always felt this connection to mountains everywhere, not specifically Germany or anywhere in Europe, but anywhere there was a mountain, I felt a connection because it was part of that experience that I had when I was 5 years old. So
That's
after
amazing.
that, what that path that eventually it led to, after I graduated from college, I went to the University of Michigan, and really what I was trained to do, just for the young people that are listening to this, my background is classical music. So I was trained as a classical
Wow.
clarinetist.
Huh.
I played B flat clarinets, alto clarinets. I played alto sax and sax quartet. I played contrabass in the orchestra, and that's what I was going to do. I mean, Oberlin School of Music, Eastman School of Music, Juilliard came to my high school in Detroit, so you could audition to get into those colleges. And I couldn't do it because I was so shy. I couldn't handle the stress of playing for someone who could let me into their institution, to their school. So I played it safe and went with what I also loved, which is literature.
Hmm.
So when I went to the University of Michigan, I pursued a degree in English literature, which I graduated with that degree in 1981. Then I served briefly in the Peace Corps as a seventh grade English teacher in Liberia, West Africa. And then I got really ill in West Africa and thought maybe it might be safer to go back back home. I went back home, and then I went to graduate school back at the University of Michigan, and I majored in poetry, creative writing. So because I had that was one of my other dreams besides being a musician, was to be a writer. So I applied while I was in graduate school. I applied for a summer job, the unusual summer break and when you're in college. And that summer job was working in Yellowstone National Park. And it was the job was a dishwasher in the Old Faithful Inn kitchen.
That's funny.
And I remember thinking, well, this is not a great job. But I also remember thinking, and my roommate told me, he said, yeah, but it's a great job, but you're in Yellowstone. It's a terrible job, but it's in Yellowstone. And you're a writer. That gives you something to write about. So I did the math with his encouragement. And I said, that would be a great place to write about, because very few African Americans write about wilderness. Very few African Americans write about the national park experience, because very few African Americans have lived that experience. So I thought that's something that I should do. So that's what I did. And so to put it into a shorter story, that brief excursion to Yellowstone, that side trip, that detour has now lasted over 33 years.
Because that's amazing.
Once I was there, I fell in love with the environment. I fell in love with the landscape, the mission of the Park Service eventually. I became a ranger just a few years later, and I've been a ranger now for 33 years. So what I always say is this, is that sometimes people make the wrong choice. Like young people, when they're trying to decide on a career, they're thinking, and their parents urging too, they're thinking, get a good job, get something that pays well, get something that has status, and all this different types of conversations and communication. And I realized what was most important was to find some sort of activity, some sort of vocation that actually spoke to who you are as a human being, that spoke to your heart, that spoke to your spirit, the sort of thing that you do in your life that as you're doing it, you're joyful. As you're doing it, you're happy. As you're doing it, you feel contented. And so follow your bliss is what Joseph Campbell used to say, the comparative mythologist. He said that in a conversation with Bill Moyers, follow your bliss, follow the thing that makes you most happy. And if you do that, you never have to work a day in your life. And that's why my career with the Park Service has been the fastest 33 years imaginable, because I felt engaged. I felt passionate about my work. I love meeting people from all over the world. You just never know who you might run into when you're a ranger in a national park like Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, or Yosemite. I mean, I remember meeting Beto O'Rourke when he was just about to run for president. I met him 2 years ago. I met a Buddhist monk who apparently had 500,000 followers in France and different parts of Europe.
Wow.
I met, it's like the list just goes on. I sold Jeff Bridges, the movie star, a national park pass when I worked in Yellowstone. I met Bo.
Did you get him to sign it?
I should have, but at that point I was starstruck. So I was just like, it's just like that, So you just never know who you might meet in a national park, because the world comes there. But getting to the point of, for the young people, but many African Americans don't pursue, don't have an avocation. They don't have a vacation in a national park. They'll choose other places to have a vacation. They'll go to Vegas, so they go to LA, places like that, but they won't go into a wilderness park. And so that's really been my mission, is to get African Americans to accept their inheritance of the national parks. And when you look at the Black Lives Matter right now, well, that's obviously an action, an event that takes a lot of spirit. It takes a lot of, that's also very stressful. There's a lot of emotion with that. And whenever you engage in work that is emotionally and psychologically and spiritually taxing, you need a vacation.
You do.
You need a reprieve. You need a respite. And there's no place or places that are better for respite and a restorative experience than the national parks.
Right.
And the irony is,
world, yes, exactly.
Yeah, the natural world. And so the irony is that the people right now who are fighting in this movement, who are in most need of respite, relaxation, and restoration, are really, statistically speaking, the one group less likely to seek out that restorative atmosphere by going to the Grand Canyon and going to Zion. I mean, these places are literally medicinal, but so what happens to an ailment if you don't seek out the medicine, or no one's told you that this sort of environment not only is not negative, it's extremely positive. So that's basically what I've been doing. But I had no idea when I was engaged in that work that it would lead to the level of the profile that I have within the Park Service, because it started out with this African American story of Buffalo soldiers protecting Yosemite 100 years ago. And when I started that story, which I inherited from my predecessors, Althea Roberson and Kenneth Noel, they told the story as well. I just did it differently. I just decided that the story needed to live beyond the borders of Yosemite. Well, to make a long story short, in getting that story out into the world, it took me with it. So when that story was on the front page of the Los Angeles Times, I was on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. When that story was displayed in the New York Times, I was the one that was in the New York Times, and then ABC News, and then NBC News, and then CBS News, and National Public Radio. All those things happened because of my passion for that story. And that's what's important to communicate to young people. If you're engaged in work, that your heart is not in it, your spirit's not in it, that it really is work. And who wants to work?
Exactly.
And they don't have to. That's the not so hidden secret of being a billionaire.
Exactly.
But mostly those folks had to work. I mean, like John D. Rockefeller had to work to become the millionaire that he became, the multimillionaire that he became.
Right.
So it's like farming. If you plant a seed in the right soil at the right time, the plants will grow. And so kids, you need to think about themselves as being that seed that's looking for the best soil to grow in and the best environment within which to prosper. And so that means finding a good school. And the good school is not a good because of its background necessarily. It's the good school because of what it can specifically do for you in your education. It's the right fit between student and teacher. That's what's really important. But that's my key message for young people is don't look for work, find a calling and find something that speaks to who you are as a human being, and then you never have to work a day in your life. And for me, that calling, that spiritual connection to work, quote unquote, was becoming a park ranger.
Right, and that's a great message. And it also shows you how to take advantage of these different opportunities that pop up. So if you had seen that job for dishwasher and thought, oh, I don't want to do that, and you didn't go, I mean, who knows where your path would have led you, but you took that opportunity, and then there were other opportunities. And the opportunity that I've had now to meet you through my cousin because of something I saw on her Facebook feed, and then I reached out and I'm like, this is so cool. I want to talk to this person and make them part of this video series. So there's just been sort of, level upon level of these little opportunities that neither of us missed. And I'm so grateful that you agreed to do this. And I think, your route to get there is just so interesting. You went from, being a musician to a writer, and now you're in the Park Service. And I think it sort of ties in all of those choices, because when you're in the natural world, I mean, it is musical. You can write about it, and then you can spread that message to other people. And I think what you were saying about people who are involved in the Black Lives Matter movement needing that rest right now, that is so true. And I also wanted to put out there that, yes, a lot of people might not be able to get out to Yosemite or some of these other national parks, but luckily in areas like, say, for example, Philadelphia, we do have a huge park system that people can take advantage of. And a lot of these systems I want to put out there are free too. You can go just for a day. I walk a lot along the Wissahickon or at the Audubon Center or Valley Forge, and I find it, very restorative, especially if you've had a tough week. Just to go, I unplug, I don't keep things in my ear, I take them out, and I just listen to all the sounds around me. And it just feels wonderful when you come out of that. So I think that's such a great message.
Yeah, and that's why I always say to young people, don't get caught up in the nomenclature. Don't get caught up in, is it a county park? Is it a city park? Is it a state park? Is it a national park? You want to get caught up in the experience of being close to the earth. That's what you're looking for. So any experience that results in that, the immediacy of that contact with Mother Earth results in healing. It results in that restorative atmosphere. So it's just whatever happens to be nearby. And it's very difficult to live anywhere in the United States and not be in proximity to a county park or a regional park or a state park. But really, if you take away those names, it's that space. It's that green
Exactly.
space that is a space that ties us to the earth, that's familiar. It's going home to be in those environments and where you can relax and literally put away your cares. And we all have experiences in our life that are very stressful, and we want to unburden ourselves of those, that weight that we're carrying. And you know, it gets overlooked, but being a kid is a lot of weight, because when you're a kid, there's all these expectations your parents put on you. There's expectations that your classmates put on you, and there's expectations that you put on yourself. Don't want to disappoint the people who matter most to you in your life. So if your mom and dad are always saying, you need to study harder, you need to read that book, study harder, they're really, what they're saying is that I love you, and I want you to have an easier road than the one that I've had to follow. And the best way to move along that road is to be as educated as possible. That's really what they're saying. But it's an expression of love and caring for a parent to say, read that book, stop watching that show on television, and pick up that, do your lessons, because they're concerned about your future. And when we internalize that ourselves, that's how the future becomes real.
So I want to know, when will we expect a picture book from Shelton Johnson?
Well, the thing that's funny about that is that I wrote one, but it didn't work as well as I wanted to, because I'm a novelist. The one book that I have published is a novel. And one of the challenges, but my background's poetry. So one of the challenges with a kid's book, which I'm planning on writing, is that a kid's book is pretty close to poetry in the sense that you don't have a lot of words to work with. You have to be very focused on what it is that you're trying to communicate. There's not a lot of dialogue, especially if it's a picture book. So it has to have that preciseness to it that poetry has. So I have the ability to do that. It's just coming up with the right story that does it for me. Because usually for me, what happens first is the story. It just appears, you know, that's what I internalize. And so I'm thinking that it'll probably happen once I retire, because then I can devote my attention to it. But at this point, I still have a few years to go, and my focus is just on these other things.
I was just going to say, I didn't think park rangers retired.
They don't have to. I mean, we have a ranger working at Rosie the Riveter, the Rosie Riveter site in California, and she literally is the oldest national park ranger. She didn't join the Park Service until she was after 85.
Wow.
And now she's turning 99 this year. And
That's
her name
amazing.
is Betty Soskin. Yeah, she's African-American, and she's absolutely brilliant. And let's just say that if age comes, if wisdom comes with age, then she's literally the embodiment of that expression. She's a very wise woman, and the years were not wasted on her. She's learned a lot from what she's lived through. So she's a walking inspiration. And but it's that same thing again that I'm communicating to young people,
Right.
is that she found that activity, that career path that spoke to who she was as a person. She had something to share, and finally found the path that led to that sharing.
And I think it's important to note too that you don't have to go through elementary school, middle school, high school, college into your career. Sometimes it does come later in life.
Yeah.
To those of us who have
there are
worked
people
in other fields.
I've met folks that have master's degrees in subjects that have nothing to do with parks, but they fell in love with the parks. That was their passion, and they don't engage in what they were trained to do because they already are engaged in what they're doing now. The park had engaged, the experience of being in the mountains had engaged them.
So one last question, what's next for you?
You know, I don't know. And that's what's exciting. It's exciting to not really know what tomorrow will bring. I do know that I'm at the last lap of the race that I've been running, which is not really a race, but being a ranger and having that career track, I'm getting into the last laps of that, because I've been doing it for over 30 years. So I have about 3 years to go. And to be honest, I'm not looking forward to it as much as you would think, because again, it was a calling. It wasn't a job. If it were a job, I would be, oh, I can't wait to retire. Oh my God, if I have to work there one more day. But instead it's like, oh boy, I'm probably going to have to retire. Oh, but I love this.
Right.
Because for me,
Oh, I was going to ask, so I have to ask you, have you ever come across any dangerous situations that kind of you weren't really prepared for? Like, I mean, did you ever come across, I mean, I would think in my mind bears or
Yeah,
other wild animals.
right. Yeah, I have. But the thing to keep in mind is that as a ranger, you're trained. You know, when you're a seasonal ranger, you come on board into a park, there's a few weeks of just training about what is entailed in the job of being
Okay.
an interpretive ranger in, in Zion Canyon or in Bryce or in Yellowstone or in the Grand Canyon. And so part of my job, and I grew up in the inner city of Detroit. There are no bears in Detroit, no black bears, no grizzly bears. Although there are black bears in Michigan, but there aren't any in Detroit, right? And so part of my job in Yosemite was chasing bears out of the campgrounds, not just chasing them as if it was some kind of party or game, but bears should not be in a campground because bears are predators,
Right.
and they can become easily habituated to human food. And if they become habituated, they do become a danger to human beings because they no longer see human beings as a threat. A truly wild bear is afraid of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So part of my job was walking into the campgrounds in Yosemite Valley, warning people about keeping their food properly stored. And if we were doing that, and that this happened to me multiple times, if someone in my group, and usually just one person with you, if they say, "Hey, Shelton, there's a bear," then we would immediately run and chase the bear out of the campground. Now, when I was a kid in Detroit, if someone said to me one day, "If you play your cards right, you're going to have a job chasing bears out of a campground," I would have said, "You're crazy. That's never going to happen." I could not have imagined a situation where I would ever voluntarily start running towards a bear. But they're black bears, and black bears are more fearful of human beings than, say, grizzly bears. You never want to run at a grizzly bear. That is incredibly dangerous. But a black bear in an environment where it knows it's not supposed to be, it's a completely different narrative. So it could turn and charge, but if it charged, it probably would be a bluff charge. Bluff charges, they run at you, but they stop right before making contact. But I've never even been bluff charged. Every bear that I ran at to get it out of the campground, so to help protect the visitors who were there and for it to not become further habituated by human foods, all those bears kept running because it's in the mind. And sometimes dominance and smartness is in the mind. It's not your body. You're putting out this energy that's assertive, and the animal picks up on that. And if you behave like a predator, it'll treat you like a predator. It's like, "Whoa, okay," and it runs off. So that was part of my job, but I couldn't have imagined that I would ever be in a situation where I would willingly be chasing a bear, because it sounds insane.
Yeah, it does.
But that's the difference between being informed, being educated, knowing how an animal is going to respond in a certain situation.
So what would you say to, say, a 13 or 14 or even a 15 or 16-year-old, if they, think they might be interested? Like, are there internships at any of the parks? Not necessarily national, but, maybe a local park. What do you think? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I would suggest first visiting the park. And if you can, ahead of time, contact the Division of Interpretation, the people who are the storytellers that talk about the park, and set up, and then become a volunteer. You can become a volunteer just about at any park. It doesn't matter if it's regional, county, state, or national. Everyone wants someone who is willing to do work for free.
For free, yeah.
So if you're in a national park, you can volunteer, and you can volunteer in whatever capacity kind of fits who you are, what it is that you're studying. If you're looking at being a biologist, then you could talk to the wildlife management folks or the folks in resource management and science and just say, "Hey, I'm a freshman in this college and I'm in biology and I have an interest in wildlife biology. Could I follow your bear techs around when they're collaring a bear and going after a bear or looking for a bear? Can I do that?" And if you're a volunteer, the answer usually is just yes, because they don't have to pay you. They'll just give you some housing, give you some information, you'll have training, and then you're out there with them. It's one of those secret, not so secret ways of getting on board in the parks, is just start out as a volunteer, because there's no competition as a volunteer. You're basically saying, "I'm volunteering my time to you to help you in your job. And in so doing, I'm learning." Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us about your job. And if I was not a librarian, I would probably be a park ranger, because one of my best experiences is when I visited Alaska about 20 years ago, and we were in Denali, and we had a park ranger take us on a hike, and that was just so wonderful to talk to him and listen to what he had to say, and just being outside. It was just a wonderful experience. I remember thinking, God, I would love this job,
Yeah,
if I
yeah.
wasn't so afraid of bears. So
But see, that's the best way of losing that fear of bears, is getting to understand bears.
mhm,
Then you're dealing with it from a standpoint of education. And it's like, so example, one thing I didn't mention is that that's important for the young people to hear. When you're passionate about a subject, by definition, you'll be good at it. If it's
right,
something that you really love, you'll be highly skilled at it, because it's not driven by, oh, I don't want to do this, but mom says I got to read this, or the teacher says I
right,
got to read this. If it turns into, oh, I love this stuff, no one has to force you to read anything because you're enjoying it. And so by definition, if you have that passion, then you'll be good at it. And if you're good at it, you'll rise up. And that quality that you're displaying will be recognized. So in my pathway, I ended up working with Ken Burns, the National Park film. I was a talking head in the National
great.
Parks America's Best Idea. I ended up inviting Oprah and Gail to Yosemite. So I ended up on the Oprah Winfrey Show in
Wow.
2010. So I've met President Obama multiple times. I met him at the White House because Ken Burns was there, and I was in the Ken Burns film. They were showing segments of the film for President Obama. So, and then I met the First Lady and Malia and Sasha in Yosemite back in 2016 when they came to Yosemite for the first time, first presidential visit since JFK.
Wow.
So I had no idea when I put that uniform on, one day I'm going to end up meeting the first African American president of the United States and his family.
What an honor.
One day I'm going to meet the movie star Jeff Bridges. One day I didn't imagine any of that stuff. I just thought it'd be kind of funny to be out in the mountains. But if you pursue that passion, you just never know what's at the other end of it. And that's really what I'm saying. That's what's great about finding work that really speaks to you.
Mhm.
You'll be good at it. And then once you have attained that, you never know what's going to happen beyond that door. It's because that door opens and another door opens and another door opens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that is amazing. And after the picture books come out, I'm going to look forward to the memoir because you have some great stories.
Well, thanks.
Love to hear more. But thank you so much for taking the time. And I can't wait for all of our tweens and teens to hear all about it. And maybe you'll be getting some letters from some of them asking questions about your job. That would
Well,
be really great.
I'm a public servant. So if those kids have questions, I will answer them.
Definitely. I'll put your maybe I'll put your information below so they can
Yeah,
send you a postcard.
just the email, Shelton_Johnson@nps.gov. That'll do it.
Great. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shelton.
You're very welcome, Gwen. Have a great rest of the day, and tell the students that I said hello.
All right, I will. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Oh, and good luck.
Thank you.